Do you remember those aesthetic posts on Tumblr with sad girl quotes from the early 2010s? Well, they've grown up and turned into full-length movies. Modern films are starting to look a lot like our doom-scrolling habits. Brain-rotted, endlessly pointless, and obsessed with looks over story. Directors now seem more interested in creating scenes for TikTok edits than actual plots. Dialogue, character development, and tension? They're kind of optional. Even film students are losing interest in watching films, according to The Atlantic. The movies are a looks magazine, but they're forgetting to plot max. Emerald Fennell is a perfect example. Saltburn and Wuthering Heights are visually stunning. Gorgeous cinematography, museum-worth set design, actors that are gorgeous. But the story? It often collapses under the weight of the aesthetic. Mood and vibe dominate, but they're leaving narrative and character development behind. But style doesn't have to mean emptiness. There's many movies out there that are beautiful, but also have a lot of substance. There's also visual storytellers who take a different path entirely. They do photos, music, and sequences, not full-length movies. So in this video, I'll focus on Fennell's films mainly, Wuthering Heights and Saltburn, but also the 2024 Bonjour Tristesse, and compare them to movies that balance both style and substance, and see why leaning into short-form, mood-driven storytelling might actually be smart for these directors, and leaving film to those with talent beyond just what looks good. Emerald Fennell seems to be Hollywood's hottest director, at least to those on TikTok who believe they understand much more than they truly do. She's the daughter of Theo Fennell, a jewelry designer, and Louise Fennell, an author. Her parents sent her and her sister Coco off to boarding school at Marlborough College, a school costing almost £62,000. This would also be where Emerald would first read Wuthering Heights at the age of 14. Afterwards, Emerald studied English literature at Oxford, which will prove to be quite ironic throughout this video. She would take inspiration from her time at Oxford for her first truly successful film, Saltburn. At first, Emerald tried her hand at acting. Most notably, she played Camilla in The Crown. While both insufferable, in my opinion, a poor casting choice. She also saw small roles in Anna Karenina, The Danish Girl, and Barbie, as well as The Midwives. Emerald obviously grew up in a creative household and was given the opportunity to pursue her creativity. We can see this through the beauty of her films. She has great eyes for aesthetics. However, her films seem to lack any actual critical thought. She's a nepo baby, much like most of Hollywood nowadays, but something for her is just missing. Emily Bronte's 1847 novel Wuthering Heights is not a love story, no matter how hard Emerald Fennell will try to fool you into thinking it is. The book is told from the perspective of Nellie, who was a servant for the Earnshaws and not a bastard daughter of a lord, as in Emerald's adaptation. You probably may have heard about Heathcliff having darker skin. In the book, he is described as like a person of Romani descent, though the wording Emily uses is the slur common at the time. However, you likely have not seen the descriptions of our other characters. Most of these are in their late teens. Catherine Earnshaw, she has a dark, expressive face, bright eyes, and dark hair. Edgar and Isabella Linton have light hair and a soft, refined appearance. In the books, they are siblings, but I'm not sure about in the movie. Nellie is also white. Heathcliff is often treated terribly by the people at Wuthering Heights, in part for his unusual way of entering the family, but mainly due to his social status and perceived ethnicity. His position as an outsider is not just emotional, but social and racial, and this tension drives much of the conflict in the novel. As we can tell, none of the characters look the way their actors in the 2026 adaptation do. It is unclear whether Edgar and Isabella are siblings in the movie, as they are of different ethnicities during 1700s England. Edgar's actor, Shahzad Latif, is of Pakistani descent on the father's side. Margot Robbie is blonde, Jacob is a tall white Australian, and Hong Chau is Thai. I don't believe that having a diverse cast is a bad thing at all. On the contrary, I believe it's wonderful. However, in this instance, I am not sure it makes sense. By making Heathcliff a conventionally attractive white man, the film removes the central tension of the novel, his racialized outsider status causing him to want revenge. Heathcliff's cruelty, resentment, and obsession with revenge are deeply tied to the way he is treated as someone who does not belong. When that element is removed, the story loses much of the social tension that motivates his character. Emerald has romanticized him, made him a hot man who is just yearning and into BDSM, but not abusive. She has made his opposite, Edgar, quite awkward and has made him a person of color. Emerald has made Nellie a person of color. Edgar is quite racist in the book, but now he can't really be racist to a white man, so he's just kind of there. Really nice though. To me, it seems she has taken the characters she did not like and made them people of color, while making the characters she did like her ideal people, Margot and Jacob. The good thing about this adaptation is that we shouldn't fear a sequel, as there is no little Kathy Linton. Before Wuthering Heights, there was Saltburn. While Emerald was already successful during the launch of Saltburn, Saltburn is really what put her into the cultural zeitgeist. Saltburn is a 2023 film about the difference in those who have and have not. It follows Oliver, a boy attending Oxford on scholarship, an experience at Oxford and with his friend, the rich aristocrat Felix. Oliver struggles to make friends as many of them already know each other from the boarding schools they attended or from popular vacation locales their families take. There's a lot of smoking and exclusion of Oliver. He often does not get invited to secret parties, only for the elites. Oxford in the film, much like in real life, feels less like a university and more like a social ecosystem where wealth quietly determines who belongs and who does not. I read all the articles I could find on life at Oxford, especially in the 2000s. Some people say secret parties were common, others don't. One thing is for sure, there is the Piers Gaveston Society Ball, which is invite-only. Maybe in 2006, when Emerald would have attended, and when Saltburn is set, secret parties were all the quiet rage. Regardless, the film uses these spaces to emphasize how socially isolated Oliver is from the world he wants to enter. Felix becomes Oliver's only real friend, and the only person who is nice to him. Oliver becomes obsessed with Felix, both his lifestyle and as a man. Felix invites Oliver to his summer home, Saltburn, where Emerald gives us a lot of scenes which she hopes come off as camp, but instead are just weird and off-putting. Many of these moments feel designed more to shock the viewer than to deepen Oliver as a character. After Oliver confesses his love to Felix and being rejected by him, he poisons him and kills him. A few years later, he has conned and killed his way into owning Saltburn. While Emerald does paint the rich as rude, sheltered, and unwilling to accept outsiders, aside from her beloved Jacob, she also humanizes them. None of them did anything worthy of murder, yet Oliver kills them, simply because he is demented and believes that is his way of revenge. Because of this, the film's attempt at social commentary becomes muddled. Instead of critiquing wealth and elitism, the story ultimately frames the outsider as the true villain. As I mentioned, it becomes null by Oliver's extreme and unwarranted depravity. In the end, the poor is still made out to be the villain because of how awful he is. The class divide that initially feels central to the story slowly becomes secondary to Oliver's increasingly bizarre actions. However, the movie is pretty. The cinematography is gorgeous, but it doesn't even really share a story. If you grab any still of it and add some faux deep text, it likely is going to garner attention and emotion. But if you actually click play and try to focus on the actual plot, it falls apart. You're like, what? The film prioritizes striking imagery and shocking moments over developing the psychology of its main character. This becomes especially noticeable when compared to films like The Talented Mr. Ripley or Purple Moon, which explore nearly identical premises but place far more emphasis on the character and tension. Saltburn has often been compared to these two movies. Emerald, though, has often rebuked it and hates it. However, I do believe these films achieve what she wanted in a much better way. The Talented Mr. Ripley, released in 1999, and Purple Moon, released in 1960, are both adaptations of Patricia Highsmith's 1955 book, The Talented Mr. Ripley. Both films follow Tom Ripley, a poor young man struggling to make ends meet in New York City. Tom meets Herbert Greenleaf, who tasks him with bringing his son Dickie home from Italy. Herbert provides Tom with an allowance. Once in Italy, he befriends Dickie and his girlfriend Marge, and growingly falls in love with Dickie's lifestyle. Tom becomes obsessed with his life and desires to have it, ending in killing Dickie to try and take his life. Afterwards, he tries to pretend to be Dickie as he gallivants through Italy. Like Oliver and Saltburn, Tom begins as an outsider looking into a world of wealth and privilege that he desperately wants to belong to. However, the Ripley films spend far more time exploring the insecurity and class anxiety that come with that position. In the American version, which was directed by Anthony Minghella, Tom is shown to not only want to be Dickie, but to be with Dickie. In this version, Tom is quite insecure about his status. He's great at forgery, but he isn't confident in deceiving Dickie. Tom tells Dickie that they are friends from Princeton. The difference in wealth is quite apparent. He does not know how to sail. Dickie and Marge must teach him. He does not know how to ski, while Dickie and all of his friends are well acquainted with the slopes of Cortina. At the time, and even now, schools like Princeton and Oxford are overwhelmingly attended by the wealthy, who often have the resources to sail, to ski, to do all of these things. These small moments reinforce how out of place Tom truly is. His lies are not just about impressing Dickie, but about trying to survive in a social world he was never really meant to enter. Dickie, once his adoration for his new friend fades and grows bored of him, quickly sees through the lies and confronts Tom. He tells him that he knows he did not go to Princeton, and that he's a fraud. Tom's anger takes over and he ends up killing Dickie. He takes over his life and eventually comes up with a convincing enough lie to get away with the murder. The movie ends as he is on a ship to Italy, where he commits yet another murder and gets away with it. Unlike Oliver, whose violence often feels sudden and excessive, Tom's crimes emerge from fear and desperation. Each lie places him in greater danger of being exposed, and the tension of the film comes from watching him try to maintain a life he cannot actually sustain. The movie is beautiful, with much of the movie taking you through a tour of the Italian Riviera and Rome. But unlike Saltburn, the beauty of these settings reinforces the story. Italy represents the life Tom desperately wants, glamorous, effortless, and wealthy, but one he can only access through deception. The 1960 version, which is directed by René Clement and stars Alain Delon, who was once considered the most handsome man in the world, is a much looser adaptation of the book. It follows a similar path with some exceptions. Dicky has now become Felipe. Elaine's Tom is a lot more cunning and confident, even though Felipe constantly treats Tom badly and is inferior to him. In this film, it is implied Tom does not get away with Felipe's murder. This movie was well known for throwing Elaine into the spotlight, as the first scene he is in had every woman in the theaters swooning. Italy is yet again the setting and is beautiful. Both Ripley films demonstrate that a story about envy and obsession with wealth can be visually stunning while still grounding itself in character and narrative tension, something Saltburn often sacrifices in favor of style. Leaving Emerald Fennell behind, let's talk about Bonjour Tristesse, to show you that prioritizing style over substance is not just a Fennell phenomenon. Originally a 1954 novel by François Sagan, it follows 17-year-old Cécile as she spends a summer in the French Riviera with her father. I actually picked up the book on my own trip to the Riviera at an English bookstore, and I could not put it down. Cécile's relationship with her father is complicated. It's just the two of them with a revolving door of women he brings home, none of whom ever stick around. When he finally wants to marry a woman named Anne, Cécile becomes jealous and hatches a plan to break them up. Through her scheming, Anne ends up dead. The novel is a tightly constructed character study. Cécile's manipulation drives the story, and we see a tense, morally ambiguous exploration of adolescence, jealousy, and consequences. The first movie adaptation came in 1958, directed by Otto Preminger. The film captures all of the above. The plot is clear, the acting is sharp, and the tension between Cécile, her father, and Anne keeps you invested. Watching Cécile scheme with her boyfriend and navigating the shifting relationships of adults is genuinely entertaining. The story is compelling, and the French Riviera locations complement the narrative rather than replace it. Fast forward to 2024, when Durga Chubose took on her own adaptation. Whether due to actual locations or updated technology, the 2024 film is a lot more beautiful, I will admit that. The colors pop, the beaches gleam, and it looks like a postcard brought to life. But there is a problem. There's no story. Cécile's scheming loses all the tension, the relationships fall flat, and the moral stakes disappear entirely. It's literally unwatchable unless you put it on mute as background decor for a French Riviera-themed dinner party. The film prioritizes aesthetics over character, narrative, or having a plot. It turns a story about manipulation and consequence into a visual snack with absolutely no substance. It's the perfect counterpoint to the 1958 adaptation, which shows that style and substance can coexist. Preminger's film proves that you can have beautiful settings, charming performances, and still tell a story that matters. Chubose's version, by contrast, is all visual gloss, a snooze fest that dazzles the eye but leaves the brain entirely bored. Much like Fennell's Saltburn, the 2024 Bonjour Tristesse demonstrates that gorgeous visuals alone do not make a compelling film. When style replaces narrative and character depth, the result is a movie that looks great but says nothing. Now let's look at two more films that get style right, without sacrificing substance. Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette is the perfect example. Yes, the pastel gowns, powdered wigs, and Versailles are almost overwhelming. The movie is pure visual eye candy. But unlike the 2024 Bonjour Tristesse or Fennell's movies, the style serves the story. We feel Marie's isolation, the stifling expectations of royalty, and the loneliness of privilege. The music, the editing, even the candy-colored sets, they all enhance the narrative rather than replace it. Coppola shows that a film can be lavish and hyper-stylized, while still making you understand the character's psychology and struggles. Sofia, like Emerald, is undeniably a Nepo baby. She's the daughter of legendary director Francis Ford Coppola. She grew up immersed in Hollywood, surrounded by privilege and opportunity. That upbringing clearly shaped her eye for style. Marie Antoinette and her other films are impeccably composed, visually striking and dripping with mood. Unlike Emerald though, Sofia's films pair that aesthetic with narrative weight, showing that nepotism might open doors, but skill and taste keep you there. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet from 1996 does something similar. The movie is outrageous. Guns instead of swords, neon signs, a modern city that looks like a music video, because it's set in Venice in California, not Italy. It's visually chaotic, but every choice is in the service of the story. The romance, the tension, the family conflict, all of it hits emotionally because the characters are fully realized and the stakes are clear. The style amplifies the story instead of covering up its absence. Both films prove that visual extravagance doesn't have to mean narrative emptiness. Marie Antoinette and Romeo and Juliet balance aesthetic spectacle with character, theme, and emotional weight. That's exactly what Emerald and the 2024 Bonjour Tristesse are missing. In those films, the cameras, lighting, and costumes are stunning, but the story underneath, there isn't one. It's not all wraps for them. There is a third option. Before we wrap up the discussion on style versus substance, I want to talk about someone who's doing what directors like Emerald can learn from. Sarah Baba. She's a photographer and storyteller who uses photos, music, and short-form visuals to tell emotionally resonant stories. Each image feels like a moment plucked from a life, with music or text adding the narrative tension. The stories emerge without needing a full-length feature, and it works because she doesn't try to force one. Directors like Emerald are clearly talented in visual composition. Just look at her movies. The cinematography is gorgeous, the framing is impeccable, and the actors are usually attractive. But when you stretch these visual sensibilities across a 2-hour movie, the story often collapses, especially if the script isn't even that strong. There's a tension between what she wants us to feel and what the plot actually delivers. And that gap is what makes her film frustrating for some viewers. Sarah's approach shows a potential solution. Tell stories where your strengths lie. Let visuals, music, and short-form sequences carry the mood and emotion, instead of forcing a full narrative that may or may not sustain itself. In other words, directors like Emerald could benefit from embracing the short-form, photo-driven storytelling that Sarah excels at, rather than always trying to build a full cinematic structure around style-first instincts. In the end, the problem with many modern films isn't the style itself. It's what happens when the style pretends to be the story. The films I discussed today are proof that visuals can dazzle while the narrative crumbles beneath them. They chase mood, aesthetic, and shock value, but they often forget that the story is what keeps viewers interested. Contrast that with other films where substance is just as important as the style. Emerald and directors like her all have talents, it's undeniable, but the lesson is clear. Style is powerful, but only when paired with substance, narrative logic, or at least a story that respects the viewer's investment. Otherwise, you end up with a film that's just pretty, that will just go on in the background of a dinner. In cinema, as in life, a pretty surface can only go so far. Real impact comes when style and story work together, not when one pretends to be the other.